Okay, so hi everybody and welcome to the UKABIF North West and North Wales online event. We're delighted that so many of you could join us today. This is the order of items that we have for you this afternoon. So we're going to start off with Dr Claire Howard, who's a consultant orthoptist at Salford Royal Hospital, looking at visual considerations following for driving following brain injury. And then Beverly Stevens is joining us from the North Wales Mobility and Driving Assessment Service, and we'll be introducing how the service works, how it supports people to return to driving following neurological injuries. And then to end the webinar today, I'm delighted to be joined by Mark, who is going to talk about his experience of returning to driving following brain injury. Just a couple of things. Microphones and cameras will be off, but you can be asked to ask questions if you wish to raise your hand during the webinar, and you can also ask questions using the question and answer box. The webinar is being recorded and that will be uploaded to the YouTube channel and emailed around to everyone who's registered, and Karen, who's supporting the event, will be able to ask answer any questions or queries that people may have. So I'm going to hand over to Claire Howard.
Thank you very much. Just bear with me 2 seconds. Hopefully in a second you'll be able to see my screen. There we go. Can you see my title screen there?
Yeah, we can see that. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks very much. Thanks everyone for the invite. I've been asked to talk about vision considerations for driving after brain injury. So my name's Claire Howard. I'm a clinical consultant orthoptist based at Salford Royal Hospital, and I have research contracts at Universities of Liverpool and Manchester. I'm the chair of the Secretary of State for Transport's Medical Advisory Panel for Driving and Vision. And that's an expert medical panel where we advise the DVLA around vision guidance. So I just wanted to go through, first of all, what the current laws are in the UK. So the law in the UK at the moment is for self-declaration. And what that means is that the driver is responsible for notifying DVLA if they have a medical condition or a medical concern. And the easiest way to do that is online, using the DVLA website, and you can declare your medical conditions. And there's been a lot of digital work going on at DVLA to streamline the process and speed up the process, because the process can be quite lengthy and time consuming. And on the website, there is also an A to Z conditions list for patients, where you can have a look to see if you've been diagnosed with a condition. You can have a look through the A to Z list. Is it something that I need to notify to DVLA? And do I need to report it? And what conditions do I need to report under? So that's the main point of call for drivers to actually look at. All conditions have to be notified, but there is an exception where if for some short-term conditions, that if they're likely to not extend beyond 3 months, so if people have got a temporary condition that's likely to recover in 3 months, then drivers are allowed to give themselves a period of time not driving, but just to see whether the medical condition improves before they declare to DVLA. But like I say, each different condition is very specific, and would strongly urge that you look at the A to Z and the information on the DVLA website, which is updated fairly frequently. So that's the driver's responsibility. So it's the driver's responsibility in the UK to inform of medical conditions or anything that might affect their fitness to drive. But actually, healthcare professionals also have a duty to notify the DVLA if they feel that there are concerns, if they feel that a driver is not going to report their medical condition to DVLA or not able to report a medical condition to DVLA, then we have a legal responsibility as healthcare professionals to notify of that medical condition. And Public safety always comes before data protection. There's always a concern for healthcare professionals around, you know, are we allowed to tell DVLA about our patients and their driving? If you have concerns that that person is going to carry on driving despite your advice, or they're not going to notify DVLA, you have a legal duty to inform DVLA of the medical condition. So ideally, as a medical professional, if you needed to notify the DVLA, the ideal situation would be to tell the patient that that's what you're going to do. Notify only if the patient can't or won't notify DVLA, or you have concerns and doubt around that. You know, really thinking about consent and confidentiality, that you're disclosing only the information that you absolutely need to and not anything additional that doesn't affect fitness to drive. There is some very clear guidance from the General Medical Council about confidentiality and reporting concerns to DVLA. And there's also some guidance from the eye care professionals. So if there's any eye care professionals who are listening to this, there's some very specific guidance for orthoptists and optometrists in this area if you've got concerns about patients' vision. But as a general rule, everybody for any medical conditions has a duty to report where there's concerns. So there is an orthoptic guidance document and an optometry guidance document. And both of these have really nice flow charts in them, which takes you through a process. Do you have concerns about your patient and their ability to drive? Do you think they're going to tell DVLA? If you don't, you know, what to do and exactly what information to give to DVLA and what the consent processes are. And this is just a little snapshot of something that I've been involved with recently last year. And this is just an example of what happens when healthcare professionals don't report concerns sometimes, and sometimes some of the things that can go wrong. This, unfortunately, was a coroner's inquest into 4 deaths on the road by 3 drivers. All 3 drivers didn't meet the vision standards to drive, and were told by healthcare professionals that they didn't meet the legal standards to drive. And because those drivers didn't declare the conditions themselves, and no healthcare professionals identified that there might be an issue with that, then unfortunately these drivers went on to kill pedestrians on the road with their cars. And there was a coroner's inquest, which has created quite a lot of media attention around, you know, should we be testing eyesight as a mandatory rule in the UK? We currently don't test eyesight throughout people's lifetime for driving. And there's a government initiative at the moment to look at should this be changed following the results of this coroner's inquest. And there is a full prevention of future deaths report that's been released, which you can read on the government website. So everything that patients need to know is on the A to Z DVLA website. So that's where all the different conditions are listed. But there is also a very detailed guide for medical professionals. And this is called the Assessing Fitness to Drive document. This is for medical professionals to be able to go and look at all the individual conditions and see whether someone is fit to drive, whether they need to notify DVLA, and what the criteria are under different medical conditions. On the DVLA website, you can actually sign up to email alerts for the Assessing Fitness to Drive. So if you are a healthcare professional on the call and you haven't signed up to this, I would strongly encourage that you do. Because if you sign up to the email alerts, every time there is a change in the document and it's updated, then you will get an email to say, for example, you know, the seizure guideline has changed. This is what's changed. And you're probably looking at 2 to 3 updates of this document per year. So if you've got an old copy of this on your shelf in clinic, then it's going to be out of date. So absolutely, you know, keep the link to the PDF document, but make sure that you sign up to the email alerts so that you know that you're giving your patients the latest and most up-to-date relevant advice. The Assessing Fitness to Drive guideline is split into multiple chapters, and I've been asked to talk about vision today, but I just wanted to highlight that obviously driving isn't just about vision. Vision is a really important part of driving, but we don't just have a driver that's got a pair of eyes and vision. There's also other things going on. There's also other diagnoses. And, you know, when we're looking at acquired brain injury, there will be relevant areas within the general information chapter and in the neurological disorders chapter that will be relevant. So all conditions that have been diagnosed need to be notified to DVLA, not just the vision parts, which we will go through. And what I'm going to do is go through each of the vision guidelines for driving, but also build in a little bit of the neurological guidance. And I'm happy to, I can't see the chat at the moment while I'm presenting, but as the rest of the webinar goes on, I'm happy to sort of have a look at if people have got questions that they want to put in writing. I'll be happy to answer those as we go through the afternoon. So in terms of vision requirements for driving, the very first thing and the thing that most people recognise as vision requirement for driving is the number plate test. So you have to be able to read a number plate at 20 metres in good daylight. This is likely the only vision test that drivers have ever done with specific regard to driving. It's done on the day of driving test, and if people pass this, in the UK, this is the only sort of vision as actual assessment that we do. But there are other vision standards that people are not necessarily aware of. And by law, if you have a licence, you're basically reporting to DVLA that you meet these standards. So you have to be able to read a number plate, good daylight at 20 metres. And this is something that the police can check at the roadside. If they have suspicions about someone driving and concerns, they can very quickly, measure out 20 metres and see if someone meets that. But there are other standards, and one of the first things that we need to know when we've got a driver in one of our clinics or one of our sort of community settings is what type of driver are they. So you've got your Group 1 driver, which is most people hold a driving licence, have a Group 1 licence, and that's for a car or a motorbike, a small vehicle. A Group 2 driver is your sort of commercial drivers, HGV drivers, passenger vehicles, and it's important to know what type of licence somebody has, because you'll see all the way through the guidance that the restrictions and the regulations are different for Group 1 and Group 2. So there's also a requirement for vision, visual acuity for driving, which is different for the Group 1 and Group 2. And there is a visual field requirement. Your visual field is what you can see in your peripheral world. So when you're looking straight ahead, what can you see to the right and left without actually looking to the right and left? So there are requirements across the board, which drivers are not necessarily aware of, that these are legal requirements. And if you don't meet them, you don't have a driving licence entitlement. So in terms of visual acuity, this is similar to the number plate test, but it's a standard. So you also have to be able to read 612 on a Snellen's chart. And that's the standard letter chart that you'll see in an eye clinic or an optician's. And that's with your glasses on. So if people have their visual acuity tested, that's always with glasses on. And if people don't meet that, they've got to notify DVLA, and they mustn't drive. There are no exceptions. There are no ways around this. If you don't meet the legal visual acuity standard, you can't drive. Obviously, you've got to think, are people's glasses up to date? Is there anything that we can do to make that vision better? But if there isn't, then that person must not drive. In terms of visual field, if someone meets the visual acuity standard, we've also got to think, does somebody meet the visual field standard? Now, in the UK, and it's very similar across Europe, we have a visual field standard, which says that somebody must have a horizontal visual field of 120 degrees. and that has to extend at least 50 degrees to the right and the left. So it doesn't have to be like a symmetrical 60 and 60 degrees, it can be 50 and 70. But basically what that means is if someone has a one-sided visual field defect, like for example, a hemianopia, which can be caused by a brain injury, then they're not going to meet the visual field standard for driving. You also can't have any defects in your central 20 degrees. So when you're looking straight ahead, that central circle of vision needs to be intact, and you can't have any defects there to be able to drive. So this is quite a specialised assessment, and not many people sort of even necessarily have this assessment done as routine, but it is a legal requirement that people meet these visual field standards. All through the Assessing Fitness to Drive guideline, you'll see these symbols, and it's so there's a red circle, and that basically means that somebody mustn't drive if they meet those conditions, and they must notify DVLA. An orange triangle means they might be allowed to drive, but they need to notify DVLA, and DVLA will make a judgment based on individual circumstances. And a green square means you don't need to do anything. You can drive, and you don't need to notify DVLA. So you'll see these symbols all the way through the book, and they can be really useful just for a quick view of what's allowed and what's not allowed, and what might need some further input. So I often get asked about what we call monocular vision, and that just basically means that someone's only got one eye. So yes, you can drive with one eye. If you've only got one eye, but your one eye meets the standards, so it can read the required visual acuity line with both eyes open, and with both eyes open you can meet the visual field requirements, which is very possible with one eye. That's not a problem at all. Then you can drive. What you can't do is suddenly lose an eye and drive. You have to adapt to the condition of having monocular or one-eyed vision. So if you had an injury or you lost an eye, you would have to sort of take at least a few weeks to adapt to that and adapt to the different depth perception before you could drive. So you can't drive initially. You have to inform DVLA. After it's been deemed that you've adapted, then chances are people with one eye will be able to drive, no problem at all. Visual field defects we've covered. There's a legal standard, and you can have a visual field defect, but you need to meet the minimum standard. If you've got a defect that's outside of the area that we're talking about, then you're fine and you can drive. But there is also something called the exceptional cases rule, which I'll talk about. So the exceptional cases rule is specifically for visual field loss, and it only covers Group 1 drivers. So it's only for cars. We couldn't expect a HGV driver to apply for this. And someone has to meet every single one of these criteria to be able to be considered under exceptional cases. And if they do meet these criteria, then their application will be considered. So this is someone who doesn't meet the legal visual acuity, visual field standard. So it might be somebody with a complete hemianopia, so complete loss of vision, say to the right side. But if they are Group 1 driver and their defect's been present for 12 months, and it's caused by a non-progressive condition, so it's a traumatic brain injury, a visual field loss caused by a stroke, or a one-off event, surgery, for example, and there's no other problems with the eyes, no other defects that we find, and actually they've adapted very well. They turn their head, they move their eyes. Then what happens in those cases is they can apply for exceptional cases. They get a special form from DVLA called the XVIS form, and if DVLA approve their application, they get a provisional disability assessment licence, and that allows them to have a driving assessment. And if they pass the driving assessment, which you'll hear a bit about later in the webinar, I'm sure, from Bev, if they pass the driving assessment, then they get issued with a full driving licence and can return to driving despite the fact that they've still got a visual field loss. So I've written a paper on this. So if anybody wants some more information about the process and the referrals and some patient experiences of going through the exceptional cases process, I've written a paper on the results from a clinical study that I did a few years ago, which is in disability and rehabilitation, if people want more information. Double vision is something that, again, a lot of people after a traumatic brain injury will have double vision. And basically this means that the two eyes are pointing in different directions, or the eyes are not moving in an appropriate way, and the person's getting two images. Now, if you've got double vision in any direction or any position, you mustn't drive. You've got the red circle there. You cannot drive, and you must notify DVLA. It may well be that DVLA will say that's okay if your double vision is controlled with glasses or with a prism. Then DVLA will likely say that you're okay to drive, but it's got to be declared. You can't just presume that it's going to be okay. It's got to be declared to them. And you know, someone could wear a patch to drive, but you've got to go back to that monocular guidance that we talked about before. You can't just stick a patch on and drive straight away, because you won't be able to judge distances very well. You have to spend 2 or 3 months adapting to the condition of one-eyed vision before you could consider returning to driving. The double vision guidance in the Assessing Fitness to Drive is one example of one of the guidelines that's currently under review, and the wording will be changing for double vision very, very soon. And this is why we want you to sign up to the email alerts, because if you're giving out double vision advice, then that advice is going to change very, very soon. And we want to make sure that you're giving your patients, or that you're getting as a patient yourself, the absolute most up-to-date and correct advice. Nystagmus is another condition that happens quite commonly after a brain injury, and this is where the eyes are wobbling, that the systems in the brain that keeps the eye still is no longer working, and the eyes are wobbling, the visual world is wobbling. Nystagmus itself isn't something that you need to notify DVLA of. It's something that you might need to tell DVLA if, say, it reduces your visual acuity enough that you don't meet the visual acuity standard. And you've got to notify associated medical conditions. So the nystagmus itself that you don't need to tell us about, but you do need to notify any other associated medical conditions that might have caused the nystagmus if they're on that A to Z list. Visual inattention is quite an unusual visual phenomena, where it's not a physical vision problem as such, it's a visual perception problem. So this is, again, common after a brain injury, where what we find is that the brain doesn't attend to one side of the visual world. So the vision itself is intact and normal, but the person doesn't attend to one side. They tend to neglect one side of the visual world. Visual inattention is a totally no and totally debarring for driving. Somebody with visual inattention must not drive. They must notify DVLA, and it's not something that can be licensed. Again, the visual inattention rules are up for under review, and there will be some wording changes, and there may well be some circumstances where very mild visual inattention could be considered. So again, please do make sure that you keep up to date with the latest guidance, and that you don't rely on what I'm telling you here today for forever. This is the correct information as of today. Just wanted to talk a little bit about stroke and TIA. So this is an example of where you need to go into separate conditions. So this isn't specifically for vision, but if someone's had a stroke, regardless of what's happening with their vision, they must not drive for a minimum of 1 month. And that's because of the stroke itself, not anything to do with any of the vision. That's a separate thing. They initially don't need to notify DVLA that they've had the stroke, But if there's a residual defect of any significance after a month, then DVLA need to know about it, and they will need to make some licensing decisions. But for that first month after stroke, DVLA don't need to know. So, like I say, the guidance is that if there's any lasting effects, such as cognitive defects or visual field defects or impaired limb function, DVLA need to know. But the stroke guideline, again, is currently under review, because there's a bit of discrepancy between if after a month then you have a lasting effect, you've got to notify DVLA. But there is also a rule within the DVLA standards, as I've already mentioned, where if something's temporary and likely to improve in 3 months, you don't need to notify DVLA, you just need to not drive. So there's a bit of discrepancy between those two timelines. So this is currently under review. Again, I would urge that you look closely at the stroke guidelines in the coming months. Traumatic brain injury has its own section in the Assessing Fitness to Drive guidelines, and basically if someone has a traumatic brain injury, they must not drive, and they need to likely need to notify DVLA, and a lot of the decisions will be done on an individual basis, depending on whether someone's had seizures or whether there's any other lasting effects, whether they've had any surgery as part of the traumatic brain injury. All those things will need to be taken into account, and each individual driver will be treated on an individual case-by-case basis. But the key rule here is that if someone has a traumatic brain injury, they must not drive, and further investigations will be needed. Just wanted to add a little bit in towards the end now about the importance of how driving is communicated. It's a really emotive topic, and we often hear stories of people saying that they were just told, you know, you can't drive and you'll probably never drive again, and, you know, very matter of fact. And we've got to remember that this is such an important part of people's lives. And, you know, we need to be realistic with people. I think if there isn't any options for returning to driving, being clear on that. If there's potentially any options for driving again in the future, that we do discuss that with patients, and that we really take care with how the message is communicated. So one of the key messages that I wanted you to take away from today is to sign up to the email alerts to the Assessing Fitness to Drive guidelines if you're a medical professional. If you're a driver yourself and attending the webinar as a patient, that you look at that A to Z list of notifiable conditions, and that you make sure that you use the online form to notify of any medical conditions. DVLA are there to, you know, to really support people to go back to driving and to make sure that people are safe to do so. They're not there to take your license away from you. So obviously you have a legal requirement to notify of medical conditions, and all of the information is on the DVLA website. Just a little tiny bit to end about driving licenses. There is quite a lot of useful information on a driving license that people don't necessarily know about. And on the back of a driving license, there's a list of codes which tell you the conditions that somebody is allowed to drive a particular car under. So, for example, you can see sort of the white box on the right-hand side of this one. There's a code for 01. 01 means that that person must wear glasses to be able to drive a car. So if that person is driving without glasses on, then chances are that they might not be meeting the legal vision standard. It's been stated on their license that they do meet the visual acuity standards, but to do so, they have to wear glasses. Obviously, they might have contact lenses in, but just to be aware, you can search up the codes on the DVLA website and what they mean. There's also on the left-hand side, there's some additional codes. So, for example, 115 means that that person's an organ donor. And there's quite a lot of codes on a driving licence which will tell you the conditions that somebody can drive under for different vehicles. So thanks very much. That is, I think I've just about managed to keep to time. That is my presentation. But like I say, I'm happy to answer any questions sort of through the chat, but we'll think in the interest of time, I think we're probably moving on to the next speaker. Thanks very much.
That's excellent. Thank you so much, Claire. So we're going to hand over now to Beverly from the North Wales Driving Assessment Service.
Can you all see that?
We can just see you. I can't see the screen share. Did Karen have your slides, Bev, or are you doing them yourself?
No, it came up before, fine.
There we go.
Okay.
Yeah, you can see it now. Thank you.
So I'm Beverly Stevens. I've been a driving instructor for over 27 years and I currently work with the Wales Mobility and Driving Assessment Service. We offer a wide range of driving assessments, so I'll go through these a stage at a time. So our Wales Mobility is funded partly by the Welsh Government. We're DVLA approved and Motability accredited. We're also accredited member of the Driving Mobility Service. We're here to help people continue or return to driving following a medical condition or going into the older ages of driving. We assess for the safety of driving due to medical conditions, but we also see youngsters from the age of 16 come through our service who just want to know whether or not they're safe to start and apply for a driving licence. We also deal with safety outdoor for mobility of drivers and passengers, and DVLA. We abide by the DVLA regulations and funding options. Our outreach centre currently is Newtown, however we're looking at trying to get one over in Bangor, North Wales, so that we can reach out to more people on the island. Our clients range from self-referrals, DVLA fitness to drives. We get a lot of police fitness to drive assessments where clients have been stopped by the police and instead of issuing them with points and fines, they decide that they'll send them here to see if there's something else going on. Brain injury we get a lot from, and definitely the strokes. So we see a wide range of different medical conditions come through our service. The effects of driving ability sort of breaks down into three areas really for us. Physical is the main one because we need to know they can operate a vehicle. We do cognitive battery assessments on each client that comes in. This is done by either an occupational therapist or a clinician. At the moment we have a nurse and a paramedic. And then obviously we look at the visual effects of driving to make sure they're hitting the standards of the law for that. The assessment process covers all areas. So we do an initial interview first to find out the relevant information of what we're assessing. We also do the eyesight test outside. This is where they've got to read a car number plate. We're actually giving them three chances there to read that number plate due to lighting and a white background, a yellow background, before then starting to walk them forward in 5 metre intervals to see where we get to before they can actually read it. Physical ability, safety of operation, all the controls. This can be down to driving adaptations or just a conventional vehicle. We evaluate health related changes with the driver as well on behaviour, because sometimes we find that they become maybe slightly aggressive behind the wheel or intimidated by other drivers. So we look at that cognitive ability in quite a few different ways. We advise it's not a driving test because we're not looking at sort of bad habits of where they hold the hands, that 10-2 type driving, but we are expecting them to be able to keep the car safe on the road and make safe decisions. At the end of the assessment, it's either a case that we recommend that they come back for regular reviews, maybe through dementia or Alzheimer's. It could be that we're saying we don't think they've achieved the safe driving skill at the moment if they've had a stroke, and we ask them to come back again in another 3 or 6 months if we think there might be further recovery. and sometimes it is a case of us just saying that they're not safe to drive anymore, which at the moment seems to be coming thick and fast. The written report details everything that we've dealt with on the drive, and this report then we send to the client as well as informing DVLA. Some clients then will go ahead and use it for Motability, for applying for a vehicle, and we ask that they all tell their insurance company that they've sat the assessment with us. The cost to the client, self-referrals have got to pay, and review driving assessments have to pay. If it's a review after tuition, then we don't charge for that because it's already on the same report. And DVLA and Motability referrals, they send the client to us and they pay. Assisted driving, if we have a client that needs adaptations, then we will look at what codes they're going to need on the licence, and that will go on to the report at the end. We advise on the Motability scheme if a client is likely to be entitled to apply for it, and also with the blue badge we do the same. Our driving adaptions range from there's such a big range of driving adaptions, but these are the ones that are most common. A steering aid we don't have to code for, but anything other than that, codes do need to go on the licence, and the driver must drive that way from there on. We tend to look at different adaptations depending on whether it's just for the fact that the limb is no longer being used, or whether or not we look at whether or not it could be causing other problems, them using that certain control. So we wouldn't tell a client with a back injury to drive with a pull push accelerator and brake system, because that's quite vigorous. We would advise them then to drive with an over-ring accelerator, which is less fatigue and less effort. We advise on vehicle adaptation assessment, so finding solutions for clients to be able to enter into a car and be able to then put their wheelchair by the side. Some people then do this over body, and they'll just take the wheels off the wheelchair and transfer it across. Other clients will have an arm that's in the boot that will allow the wheelchair to come to the side of the door. So there's lots of different ways that we can assist them with wheelchair access. Here we have the pull push, which I was mentioning a second ago, with a steering aid. On the right there we have a steering aid with remote secondaries. So if it's a client with only one upper limb, they will use the remote secondaries to be able to control all the accessory controls on a vehicle. We have a left foot gas system and the over-ring system. And we also do boot hoists for clients and passenger clients to assist with the lifting of the wheelchair in and out. Otherwise, we have a system that goes on top of the roof and delivers the wheelchair to the side of the vehicle. So there's lots of different adaptations that we can use here. We assess for wheelchair assisted vehicles. So it might be that they gain access from the rear of the vehicle or the side of the vehicle and position the wheelchair up to the driver wheel and then drive from there. It could be that they don't use the driver wheel at all and they just drive from joystick. If it's a passenger assessment, it may just be that they're needing a bit of a bigger vehicle to be able to sit in the rear of the vehicle in their actual wheelchair. Our continuous support and advice, regular review of driving safety. This could be on a 3-monthly review, 6-monthly, 9-monthly, up to a year. If driving is no longer possible, then we do try and give alternative mobility solutions for the clients, so that they do have some hope of being able to still participate in going out and about. So this was just a brief talk really on what we offer here as a service. There's so much to cover that we couldn't put it all into half an hour, but that's just a brief idea of what we outline.
That's great, thank you. I'm just going to go into the chat and see if we have some questions. So I know there was some questions for Claire in the chat as well, so I'm wondering if maybe we have a little bit of time to talk through those. Claire, would you be able to do that? I know you've made some replies.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Sorry, I've been typing away. I think Laura's had a few questions. I think some of the questions were around. Let me just go back to the top. So some of the questions were around if you're not sure, that if you tell someone, if someone's told you that they've declared a condition to DVLA but you're just not sure, I think basically if you're not sure, then the best and safest thing to do is to document it in the patient's records and declare it to DVLA. You can email the medical advisors at DVLA and just ask them and say, I'm dealing with this patient, this is the name and address. They've told me that they've declared X medical condition. I've told them that they shouldn't be driving. Can I just check that they've done it? And often they won't give you a response. They won't say, yes, they've done it, or no, they haven't, but they'll say, I've noted your concerns and we'll deal with it at our end. So basically, if they have declared it, then great. If they haven't, then they'll instigate a letter to the person, to the driver, to say it's come to our attention that you've got this medical condition. So yeah, that's the best thing is if you're not sure to check it, because at the end of the day it comes down to public safety, doesn't it? And keeping the roads safe. There was another question around the exceptional cases driving process for learner drivers, and I've put the link in the chat to the website on that, but it's a very similar process. So if you've got someone who's never learned to drive and wants to learn to drive but has a visual field defect and meets the exceptional cases criteria, they basically just do it in a slightly different way. So they apply for a provisional license and they have an initial assessment to make sure that they're safe to be on the road. Then they learn to drive, and then they have their sort of driving assessment. So it's very possible. I've supported a few people to learn to drive with a complete homonymous hemianopia. There's a few new questions that have just come in that I've not actually got through to reading yet, so I'll just
yeah. So
Edward disappeared.
Yeah, so Edward's asked about mobility scooter standards. So if a person's been deemed unfit to drive a car, would that mean that they would then not be able to drive a mobility scooter either? I don't know if Bev, do your service deal with mobility scooters as well, or are you cars only?
No, our service doesn't, but I know there's other services that do. We just haven't got a big enough off-road area to be able to do it.
So
yeah,
Claire,
from a vision point of view, it depends on the class of the mobility scooter, basically. So there is a section of the DVLA website about mobility scooters, and it absolutely depends on the class. So some classes of mobility scooters you actually need a driving license for, so you would have to meet the legal standard, but they're usually the ones that go on the road and over, so I think it's about 8 miles an hour off the top of my head. But there are some classes of mobility scooter, there are vision requirements for all of them. Some of them just have an actual visual acuity standard and not a visual field. So some of the ones that go quite slowly on the pavement, like the sort of the class 1 vehicles, you do need a certain level of vision, but it's quite a low standard. So it's worth looking at the class of mobility scooter that people want to drive, or having a conversation with them around, actually your vision is this and you would be able to drive this type of scooter but not this type of scooter. So there are definitely different class regulations. They've all got vision standards, but some of them are quite low in terms of just visual acuity and not visual field.
Lovely. So I think that's the end of the questions for the moment, but please do continue to type into the chat. So Bev, if you could stop screen sharing, that would be great. And oh, so Casey's just added another question. So I'll cover that first and then we'll come on to my discussion with Mark. So she's asked, have patients struggling to accept that they cannot drive? And they're fixed on the idea of driverless cars developing in the tech world. So what's people's views on driverless cars from driving mobility perspective or a visual perspective?
I mean, we're just not there yet, are we? I think really for that person, you can understand why they're sort of fixated on that there might be an option, there might be some technology that might help. I think one of the conversations that I'd be having with that person is, you know, could they be eligible for driving under exceptional cases? Because if they don't have any other visual conditions and they've adapted quite well, chances are that if they're struggling to accept that they can't drive, have they been told that there might be an option? You know, if they're eligible, has exceptional cases been discussed with them? Because I think being told you can't drive ever is very different to being told there might be an option for you to be able to return to driving in X number of months. But obviously just making sure that that's a realistic conversation, that that person doesn't have another underlying condition like, say, epilepsy, that means that they won't be able to. But yeah, I mean, I don't know whether Bev's got any other sort of thoughts on that. I think at the moment we're not there with driverless cars, are we? That it would need a law change for somebody to be you know, sort of in charge of a car, or it's just not something that we're really there with yet.
And then I'll just take the last two questions and then we'll move on to the next section, and I'm sure we'll have some space for questions later. But Edward's asked, if someone is okay from a visual field and acuity perspective, but they have perceptual impairments, can they still be referred for an on-road driving assessment?
Yes, unless it's visual inattention. So if that perceptual problem is visual inattention, then that is absolutely debarring to driving, and they cannot be on the road for an on-road driving assessment. But if they've got some sort of underlying perceptual problems that you're not sure about, that they meet the legal vision standard, but you've got some perceptual concerns, they would actually usually be quite a good candidate for an on-road driving assessment. Again, I don't know if Bev wants to add anything to that.
Yeah, we see quite a few clients that come in with impairment, and we do a lot of that. Yeah, it depends on the person on the day, and there's quite a few things we look at.
Okay, and then the last question is from Dr. Balisi, who has asked that obviously the guidance states that clinicians should inform the DVLA if they have a concern about a person's fitness to drive, but it's quite difficult to implement this in practice. So, for example, if someone has a TBI, they've regained their licence through the driving assessment, but the treating team later become aware of several near misses, when does that actually hit the threshold of notifying or referring the case back to the DVLA, rather than reflecting the normal variability that you might see in drivers?
Yeah, I mean, as a healthcare professional, I think if you've got concerns, it's always best to highlight them and flag them and trigger that to DVLA regardless. I think if someone's had a driving assessment, but then it comes to your attention at a later date, maybe, you know, things have changed, or it comes to your attention at a later date, maybe from a family member, that there's been concerns and there's real concerns, that is something that absolutely as healthcare professionals we need to be highlighting and flagging and letting DVLA do their investigations and making that decision. I think more than likely, I mean, the key thing is to document it in the records that you've got concerns and that you've triggered a referral to DVLA. More than likely, even if someone's had a recent driving assessment, if you flagged some concerns to DVLA, they would look at that. And you know, I don't know, Bev, whether you have instances where people come back for second driving assessments quite quickly.
Yeah, we have ongoing, and if it was our service here, we would definitely be asking them to come back again within a period of time, because we want to keep an eye on it.
Yeah, which makes sense. I will put the email address for the medical advisors into the chat.
Wonderful. Thank you, Claire. So we'll come back at the end if there's any further questions into the chat. But for this section, I'd like to introduce Mark Davies here. So Mark is carpenter, ultra runner.
I was.
And Mark's going to talk a little bit about kind of his journey to return into driving. So Mark, starting off, can you tell us a little bit, as much as you're comfortable, about what happened to you?
I was hit by a drunk driver while walking home on the road near my house. I had polytrauma, a brain injury, a fractured skull, and massive physical injuries to my right leg, right and left leg, requiring skin grafts. I was taken by ambulance to Stoke-on-Trent, where I was in a coma for 4 months. I was in hospital for 9 months. I received neuro rehabilitation in hospital and then in the community. My right leg was weak because it had been smashed to bits. I had to use a crutch to walk. My hand movements were also affected. By my brain injury, but also nerve damage. I had surgery to improve the movement of my fingers. I could hardly speak. People found it hard to understand me. My language was affected. I struggled to understand more difficult questions. I didn't say very much, as I couldn't find the words to express myself. My memory was poor. I couldn't remember information about my life, such as getting married or my children being born. So can't.
Okay, so someone's asked if I can make my screen bigger. I'm not sure what the screen looks like. I've tried to put it on speaker view, but I'm not sure if that's working. But we'll carry on. So, Mark, can you explain what it was like for you when you were told that you weren't able to drive following the injury?
I used to get up every morning, look out the window, and see my car, and think about how I couldn't drive it. It's meant I was less independent. My wife had to drive me everywhere. I drove to the rehab facility in the world in a taxi several times a week. It used to wind me up, relying on other people
Yeah, very much wanted just to be able to
Yeah.
to go where you wanted to go and to do the things you wanted to do, didn't you? So what did you know about returning to driving before the OT and the MDT at the North Wales Driving Centre met with you? What information did you have before that?
Very little. I thought it would be a simple process that would get me back in my car. I was physically able to drive. I thought that I would just need a test, and that I would pass it easily.
And did you have any worries about the return to driving process when it was explained?
Well, I wasn't worried until the assessor was in the car. Then I realised it was more serious than I thought. I started to work out that there was a lot of thinking involved in driving, and my brain injury might affect my abilities.
Because I think it's fair to say that you were very aware of the physical side of things.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to you about kind of memory, concentration, and you were less aware that that might be a problem until you saw the driving.
Yeah.
So what was the main things that helped you return to driving?
Well, frustration mainly.
That was a motivator, was it? You being frustrated and not wanting to use the taxis?
Yes, it was, yeah.
Yeah. What else was helpful?
Driving refresh sessions with my local driving instructor who are experienced working with people with brain injuries.
Mm-hmm. I think that was quite an important part, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That the driving instructor understood about your injury and about the physical disabilities.
Well, he lived down the road.
Did that help as well?
Well, he knew all about it.
Oh yeah, understandable. So for you, it's very important that a person understood your difficulties and helped you adapt to them. Yeah. What would be the main message that you would like to give to the professionals and other people here today who may be working with people who want to return to driving?
Help them get their independence back. Make sure an OT gets involved to help them understand the tests.
So knowing what you were signing up for in terms of going to the driving assessment service,
Yeah.
that was useful, so you knew what to expect.
Well, I didn't really tell. I got in the car.
Yeah, there's no, in my experience, there's no real way of knowing about someone's driving and their ability to return to driving without those on driving assessments in the car.
I remember that there was an OT got in the back to help the assessor, and he was like, "Oh dear, here's another one." I got in to the road. He said, "Mary saying, oh, this guy's all right."
So do you feel because of maybe your speech and the physical disability that you have, that the assumption was that you might not be able to drive?
Yep.
Yeah. So you felt that was assumed?
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's definite. Can I ask you, I know it's not on our prepared thing, but what adaptations have you got in your car?
just not on my steering wheel.
Yeah. And
Turn around.
how did you feel about having that in the first place?
Yeah, I was right.
Mm-hmm. Did it upset you at all having to have
No.
No? So actually having adaptations, you found it really helpful?
Yeah.
Were you aware of those adaptations before you went to the driving assessment centre?
I'd say I was, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it helped open up options that assisted you. Yeah, lovely. That's great. Does anyone have any questions at all? Are you happy to take some questions? If there's any questions for you, yeah. Let's have a look. Okay, so are adaptations self-funded or there are grants supporting? So a lot of my experience working within an MDT is through kind of insurance. And I think Bev might be the best person maybe to answer if there are any grants that you're aware of, Bev, at all?
Yeah, if you're on Motability, then it's funded by them, or otherwise there are different support sectors that will help. So if you've had a stroke, applying to the Stroke Society would help, or vice versa, things like that.
And then the other question that we've got from Laura is, do the DVLA have to advise that a person with a remaining deficits following a stroke are at a level of ability to participate in returning to driving lessons, or who decides that? So speaking from my experience working within an MDT, it is often the members of the multidisciplinary clinical team, so I'm part of Mark's clinical team, who will talk with the individual, and we will have done some cognitive assessments and working in conjunction with the occupational therapist and ophthalmology and visual assessments if that's needed. Then we will consider actually whether the person is likely to be able to benefit from the driving assessment service. But we would never prevent somebody from going to the driving assessment service, because the driving assessment service themselves do an absolutely fantastic job, in my opinion, of assessing who is suitable and who isn't. You would agree with that, would you, Mark? Yeah.
We would advise that everybody would come through us, because unless you're actually on the road, you can't really tell whether they're going to be okay or not. It's on road where it counts. So even if you're unsure and you think it's, they're probably not going to be able to drive, they're better to come along, because there's so many adaptations out there that we can try and get them on the road as best as we can. Yeah.
And I would agree with that as well. I think in my experience, where we felt as an MDT, actually the individuals probably isn't going to be able to return to driving. The driving assessment centres have supported that view, and it's allowed us as a clinical team to be able to work with the individual to adjust to that. Whereas the MDT blocking someone from accessing a service that may be able to help them, regardless of the outcome, that damages the therapeutic relationship and really damages your ability to actually support someone to look at alternative. Okay, so where are we? So Mark, do you think it would have been helpful if you'd been told about the driving assessment process at any earlier stage in your recovery?
Probably.
Yeah. So I know it's probably going to be how long is a piece of string, but where would you feel that the best time to bring that up might be?
Well, when you think you're capable of driving again, I suppose.
So when you're asking for that yourself, yeah, because obviously there was an acute phase in your recovery where you were so unwell and so injured that driving probably wouldn't have been on the radar at all. But when you started getting back involved in activities and having to access the community and just trying to live your life again, that was the phase when I remember that you said, I want to get back in the car because of the frustration.
Dude, wake up, come on, look at me car.
Yeah, completely understand. Okay, so Miguel's asked, at what point do they consider cognition in the decision to drive, memory, orientation, executive skills, such as the Rookwood? and if people need to retake a theory test. So the theory test is an interesting one because I took a theory test. I was the first cohort of people that had to take a theory test, but quite a lot of my friends and family members have never taken a theory test and yet are driving. You've never taken a theory test either? No. So Bev, I don't know if you're best placed to ask to talk really about that.
Yeah, our clinicians cover cognitive batteries, Rookwood, Mocha. There's different ones for different clients, so they will decide which one's best for that client on the day, and that is part of our assessment. Theory tests, we help younger clients to be able to pass the theory test, but you know, once you've passed your driving test, you don't need to do another theory test. It's down to yourselves to read the highway code to keep up to date.
Yeah, so there's no legal requirement for people
No.
to retake that, because like I say, that would capture a large proportion of the population, wouldn't it, if there was? Okay, so Claire's commented that unless somebody doesn't meet the vision standard, then they should be referred.
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay, so is there training for advice on helping inform people more? So this has come from a physio, and it's something that they feel that they could inform more on as a service. So I think there are a few links that have already been put within the chat.
Yeah, and we can send out our forms from here if you want to have some to hand out to clients. We have brochures from here.
Lovely. And my colleague Katrina's asked, is there any guidance of cut-offs in terms of like processing speed, reaction time, that type of thing for driving?
There's no cut-offs, but we would expect them to be able to deal with on-road situations, and that's part of the driving assessment. Someone can score really low on a cognitive battery and the driving can be absolutely fine. And you know, we see it the other way where they score really high on it and the driving isn't fine. So it's on road where it counts. Yeah,
and I think again, in my experience, I would definitely agree with that, because it's more about how you react to the on-road environment. And Bev, I'm right in thinking that the on-road assessments, they're all dual controlled vehicles, aren't they?
Yeah, we have 8 different vehicles, all with different adaptations on, all dual controlled. It's got to be done in one of our vehicles. Yeah, we have so much spec, it's unbelievable.
Fantastic, lovely. And Abby's asked, if you feel someone should have a road assessment, do we await for DVLA to refer to the driving assessment, or put in request in to the DVLA to refer them?
DVLAs tend to take a bit longer because DVLA drag the feet a little bit with sending referrals out. A self-referral will come to us quicker, or if you're on the Motability scheme, then you can ask Motability to refer to here.
Yeah, and again, in my experience as part of the MDT, we encourage the self-referral process. So lots of the clients that I've worked with who've been through Bev's service, because we're local, it's all been self-referrals that we've done and facilitated through the MDT team. Okay, lovely. Are there any other questions? We are a little bit ahead of time, which makes a change for presentations, usually running onward. But if we don't have any questions, then we will close the webinar there. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. The recording will be circulated, and I hope you found it helpful.
The last question, just to answer that, if DVLA have got the client's licence, then we can ask the DVLA to put them on a PDAL licence or a Section 88 cover to allow the client to come and do a driving assessment for the day.
Okay, and Pam, who is also a colleague of mine, has got her hand up. So Pam, did you want to ask a question? I'm not sure if you're able to disable your mic.
Got it. Hiya. Sorry, I thought I'd get in there quickly. It might have been answered before, but I was just wanting to ask, and thank you very much, Mark, as well. I just wanted to ask, can people get financial help? Because obviously the self-referrals are quite expensive for some people. Is there a way of getting financial help for that, for the people who maybe are on benefits and so on? Thank you.
I'm not aware.
There are some like the stroke units, or I know brain injury, they sometimes help fund. Otherwise it's Motability, really.
Lovely, that's great. So lots of thanks there to Mark. I think people really enjoyed listening to your story. That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing and joining us. The last screen share I want to do is to the UKABIF website. Obviously this is part of the North Wales and North West region UK United Kingdom acquired brain injury. So I will share the screen for that forum in case people aren't aware. They do lots of awareness raising and have a fantastic conference, and there's lots of regional groups. So if people wish to get involved, I will put the screen share on for their website. And thank you again for attending.